It's the Unwins. Hello, Jen. Hello, David.
We're here. Hooray.
Fantastic at long last. We've been trying for weeks to have you on, and I'm so thrilled. Jen, of course, for those who don't know, is a clinical health psychologist. David, you are a general practitioner here in the UK, a family doctor in other ports of call. Now, you guys are at home on the range for this, and I really do want to say it is the range. It's your family farm on the shores of the Irish Sea near Liverpool. Set the scene a little bit more for us.
Okay, so from our bedroom, you can see Blackpool Tower and miles of marsh. So we're not really quite by the sea. There's about a mile of marsh. We've got 2 acres of land, and we produced all our own meat for nearly the last 20 years.
So, how many
So we've got
critters do you have on the farm?
critters. Well, at the moment, we've got 2 sheep, 3 geese, 3 hens, and a cockerel called Sir Lancelot. We've got a blue-tongued skink lives in the kitchen, which
A
is a large
skink? What is
yeah,
that?
it's
Is
a
that
large
reptilian? What
yeah,
is?
We're
it's
not
a
going to eat. We're not going to
we're
eat
not
that
going to eat the
season.
blue-tongued skink though. That's a pet. That's a
Oh,
pet. But Jen
and
doesn't
he's
like it.
a hard, scaly reptile pet.
Yeah,
Uh,
about 2 foot long with a blue tongue.
Holy
So
doodle.
there's that. And then there's the Jen's cat, Dobby.
Dobby,
Yeah,
sweet. And the
Mm,
cockerel, you've only named the ones then that aren't going to be, farm to
that's
fork.
absolutely, that's how you can tell. So if one of the animals here has a name, it's not
it's
for
safe.
eating, it's
It's safe.
safe. Yeah.
And we normally get a pig every autumn, so that'll be coming soon.
A
Coming soon,
pig.
piggy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there's
And
no waste here at all.
and
Everything
All
is
our
recycled and fed to something.
all our leftovers, if there are any from our meals, go to go to the animals.
fantastic. So you raise your own, you're doing that farm to fork thing, and that you give the
Yeah.
animals a good life. And
Mhm.
I suppose you don't feed them grains.
No.
No, because particularly that's the wonderful thing about sheep. We've got just enough grass for them to eat. So they're organically raised, and we keep them a lot longer. So we don't actually eat lamb at all. We're eating mutton when they're 2 or even 3 years old. So we hope they have a long life, and we like looking at them too. It's fun.
Yeah. And are you the one who gets up in the morning, Jen, to feed them, or is that you, David?
The rule is that anything that's outside is my responsibility, and I have to do anything to do with it. And the inside is more Jen's
But
responsibility.
I make him a coffee first thing, so he's got the get up and go to get up and go.
So he gets the juice first, and then it's the skink
Yeah.
and the cat and all the rest. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
you guys have got a magnificent library there. It's very fetching, loads and loads of, I'm sure, interesting books. And that's wonderful, a wonderful setting for your epiphany story, Jen, because I understand that all of this started when you were 48 and you went to the local supermarket and started flicking through a bargain
Yeah.
bin for books. Tell us about that.
Yes. So it was yet another dreary January up here in Southport, and one where I'd probably put on a stone or so over Christmas, and I was thinking, oh, I need to do something. And in the bargain bin in the local supermarket was a book called Escape the Diet Trap by Dr. John Briffa, who's actually a UK GP. And I think it was £1 or something. So I thought, right, oh, I'll pop that in with the trolley and take that home. And yeah, that was a big pivot point for both of us, really. So I read it and really understood it. It was basically a low carbohydrate sort of real food diet, and explaining in simple terms really about sugars and insulin and all of these things that we now understand in absolute detail. And I've always been one for a good old diet plan, particularly in January. So I thought, right, I'll jump right into that. So I jumped right into the low carb diet plan. Felt pretty ghastly for about 8 days while my body went, what? No carbs.
Yeah.
And then the lights all came on day 8, and I felt amazing. And then I started sort of reading bits out to David and sort of talking with him about the science and trying to understand that. And I did so well on it and felt so well. That was one piece in the sort of several pieces of thing that came together in a sort of perfect storm to start off the project that we were working together on. But that was one revelation for me, and ever since then, so that's 10 years now, I've been following a low carb or a keto plan. Obviously it sort of changes a little bit over time, but really that was a massive part of my own health journey. I've been a lifelong yo-yo dieter, food addict, struggling with weight. Really that's my life story, and anyone who knows me knows it was my life story. And things have been so much easier since I discovered that. So
and it's become the basis
Yeah.
of your book too, which is Unputdownable, A Fork in the Road. Fantastic book. And we can talk more about some of the things some of the tools that you tell us all about there. And I loved how in an earlier conversation, you told me, you said at the time when you grabbed that book, you were 48, David, you were a little bit older. And Jen, you said that I could tell I had a miserable, fed up, sleepy husband on the verge of slipping into pre-diabetes. So what was your personal situation then, David? You were GP, but as far as I know, you'd lost your sense of purpose.
Yes, I think I'd lost my sense of humor, my sense of purpose. So I was tired, really, and disappointed. I remember I used to have a little nap at lunchtime. So I used to feel quite sleepy after morning surgery and so on. So I would have my lunch, and then I'd actually lie on the couch, press do not disturb because I was senior partner, and I'd have to have a little sleep so I could face the afternoon. And even then I'd have to have a coffee and a few chocolates and biscuits to get me going for the afternoon. So I was tired. I was disappointed really in myself. You start as a young doctor full of hope and the things you're going to do. And then I was 55 years old, and I didn't really feel I'd achieved very much in the time. So I was sleepy and a bit disappointed. And
but how did you know you were pre-diabetic as well? Was it just, constantly reaching for the sugar and having those glycemic lows after, having to reach for the chocolates?
Yeah, I didn't know. That's the thing. It wasn't until years later that we were demonstrating blood sugar monitoring to a group of people, and we went around the table, and I had the worst blood sugar of anybody around the table. Wow. So I didn't actually discover that I probably have diabetes, actually, not pre-diabetes. I didn't know, other than I was sleepy, I had middle-age spread, and my blood pressure was high as well. That was another problem. So I had lots of the same problems that middle-aged people have. And I just thought it was all aging. I just thought, this is natural aging. I need to rest a bit more.
And so what was your plan then before Jen started to read things out of this book? Had you planned to retire and maybe, follow one of your other hobbies and think, well, that's it. I did my bit for medicine and I'm not helping anyone.
Yeah. I was 55, and actually that's nearly now the average age of GPs giving up, and all my friends were retiring. I was going to do exactly the same. I wonder what I was going to do. Probably something to do with wildlife. I can't remember. But no, retirement was imminent. I knew how much was in the pension pot. I was packing my bags ready to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then we had a conversation about, well, do you have to go out with a whimper? So we've got this knowledge now about the low carb, and David was particularly worried about the diabetic population because they seem to be getting sicker and sicker, fatter and fatter. More and more medications, and everything he was doing wasn't really helping. So I had a conversation with him about, well, if you're going to retire, how could you do it in a positive way, or what might be a good project to sort of go out on? And we'd always wanted to work together. We'd never done it, even though we're in the same town, because I'd worked at the hospital. Obviously, I was doing my psychology with people with chronic conditions. We had some patients in common, didn't we? We hadn't really sort of done a project together, and it did seem like our skill sets were really well aligned to do a project. So we thought, well, we'll have a go. We'll do this project. We'll do it in an evening because there's no funding for it. We'll just do it because it's going to be fun, and it'll hopefully make a difference to people. And as they say, the rest is history. So we started off with 18 people in the first group. We ran them on a Monday night in our own time. I've always run groups at work. I really like the power of groups and the way that can work to help people change their behavior. It's not something that the GPs know about, so I brought that to the party. And the fact that we were living like this as well, so we could sort of tell people what we were eating. I think they felt, well, if the doctor's doing it, there must be something in it.
So you're all on this voyage of discovery together.
Yeah.
But I understand too that you got your ear chewed off by a patient as well, who reinforced the messages that your wife was giving you out of this book.
Yeah, that was just before Jed bought the book, actually. That was a lady who I'd been treating for years. I knew that she wasn't cashing in her prescriptions for her diabetes medication. And so I wrote to her, inviting her to come and meet me to discuss what was going on. And the point is, when I saw her, I didn't even recognize her. She was a lady in her mid-50s who'd been very overweight. But when she came in, she looked fabulous. And to the extent that I tried to show her out of the room, saying, I'm so sorry, I'm expecting Mrs. Jones. And she said, but I am Mrs. Jones. And she wanted to complain. She was cross because she said, you've been prescribing drugs for me for 10 years and I'm off them now and I feel better than I've ever felt. Why didn't you tell me that bread turned into sugar? And she even asked if I had GCSE O-level biology. She was very challenging, but how right she was. I had a lot to learn. So
yeah, what a punch in the face, though, after being on the job for 25 years. Wow.
She was a very assertive lady, but I mean, a good point. It was true. I had been giving her medication that she plainly didn't need. And also I had lessons to learn. I needed to wise up and fast.
So you did it with some admirable speed. You did wise up quickly. You were in the groups with your wife, and it was your voyage of discovery. And I want to fast forward because we don't want to linger too long on how you got your start, because man, you have got everything on fast forward now. I follow both of you on Twitter. I can't keep up. Every 2 minutes, there's something else that you're drawing my attention to. And you've done how many of these medical papers born of, I think, an opportunity that grew out of a consult, really, with Professor Roy Taylor about how you needed to quantify your results. You're getting great results. So draw us that picture, if you will, because I think is fascinating, because a lot of practitioners aren't crunching the data, and that's really important.
You're right. I think if you're going to do something unusual, you have a duty really to collect data and be critical about how you're doing. And I learned that really early on. I needed to collect data.
We did it. I mean, because it was a pilot study, we did it right from the start. So we had people come in and they were being weighed and measured, and they had the regular blood tests, and they actually liked that. The patients liked it because they saw the results, and they were pleased to be monitored, really. So we'd always set out with the intention of doing it as a small pilot study in that way.
And also, you see Jen's background. She'd been an academic as well as a clinician. So Jen had published before, I never had. But as you say, fast forward, so using that data, I think something like we've now published maybe 14 or 15 peer-reviewed papers, which I am astonished when I see, because I was 55 and I never had any thought of publishing. I didn't know where. I remember at the beginning, I couldn't even run an Excel spreadsheet. I got a 19-year-old assistant accountant to run my Excel spreadsheet and teach me how to load the data.
But isn't that brilliant? You were learning new skills as well.
Yes,
so you were constantly challenging yourself, which is what we say in midlife. As long as you keep engaged, you're learning new things. As long as there's a shiny object over there, and you guys certainly found yours. So after you started to collect the data, then you've produced all of these papers, some groundbreaking material there. Give us the most important takeaways from some of these 14 papers.
Yeah. I think so. Pre-diabetes, I know from our data that we published that I think it's 96% of everybody who chooses a low carb approach will reverse their pre-diabetes. That's an amazing conversion rate. And then if we go to people with type 2 diabetes, I know that 51% of everybody who chooses a low carb approach at Norwood Avenue will get their diabetes into drug-free remission. I also know that the patients will see improvements in blood pressure, liver function, lipid profiles, so many things. And these are really significant. If you think of what drugs achieve, we're doing this. Drugs will only achieve a fraction of what we're able to do with lifestyle medicine.
Well, the thing
and
is,
on top
too,
of that, we're saving money.
And also, I mean, we'll get to the money side of it, but also in this period in our lives, you know, we can eat anything when we're kids, teenagers, 20s, 30s. You start getting into your 40s, mid 40s, 50s, your digestive system can run into some trouble. Is it fair to say, and I'd like you to define insulin resistance, in general, in our 50s and 60s and mid 40s, this is when things kick off and we can be on the path towards metabolic syndrome. And, you know, fatty liver disease, I know that you quote Professor Taylor as saying that's the first silent scream of insulin resistance and all of that. So can you connect all those dots for us?
Yes, I can. So the hormone insulin has a very special job to do. Insulin controls your blood sugar because a high blood sugar damages your arteries. And it does this over time. And that's why with type 2 diabetes, you end up with kidney problems, heart problems, and brain problems. So insulin is there to control your blood pressure. Many people, your blood sugar, sorry, many people as they get older start with a metabolic syndrome. And I think the key point in the metabolic syndrome is you have insulin resistance. This means insulin is not doing its job as well as it used to. And so you're not able to keep your blood sugar down low as easily as you did in your 20s. So I can't eat now anything like what I used to eat if I wish to stay healthy.
But why does insulin, what happens to your receptors for insulin? Is it just wear and tear?
Right. Well, in part, you mentioned fatty liver. So we need to just rewind a little bit. Where does insulin put the sugar? So insulin gets rid of sugar. So it gets it out of the bloodstream and into cells where it can't do any harm. So insulin is pushing sugar, and it pushes sugar into your muscles for energy. But if you eat more cakes than you need for energy, where does that extra sugar go? And insulin pushes it into your belly, giving you a bigger belly, which I certainly had. And also it's pushing sugar into your liver, giving the fatty liver that Roy Taylor talks about. So we now have another pandemic. There's a pandemic of fatty liver disease. So a quarter of everybody in the developed world has fatty liver. And the final point is that fatty liver interferes with the action of insulin so that you struggle to get rid of blood sugar. And that's how you become diabetic. Type 2 diabetes is in part due to fatty liver, due to the diet that many of us have been having for years.
And is it because for many years we've been dining out? I mean, I was a vegetarian for 10 years and I know I ate way too much pasta and all these vegetables, which reduce, you know, below ground vegetables, all of that. I know better now, but I just think about the way everyone I knew ate. You know, there was a period there where we didn't eat any animals because, of course, ideologically, ethically, that was a problem area. So all my friends and I, we were vegetarians, but we all kind of porked up in our 40s.
Yeah.
You know, not in a bad way, not in an extreme way, but sort of just thinking, well, where is this coming from? This must be hormonal. Yeah. And, you know, we weren't getting enough protein because we were only eating big plates of spinach.
Yeah, or you're very likely having more starchy carbs. And the other perspective I have is when I think back to my childhood, obesity was really rare, really, really rare, particularly amongst children and young people. And now it's very common. And I in the practice, we've noticed an 8-fold increase, 8 times more people with type 2 diabetes than when I started as a young doctor. And an associated point is these people are younger and younger. So it used to be a disease of old age. Most people with type 2 diabetes were over 60 or over 65. Now, many of them are under 50. Something's gone badly wrong, and I think it's gone badly wrong with diet. We're eating differently than we did 40 years ago.
Is it also, Jen, and this brings you into the conversation, it's a lot of us find ourselves unwittingly sugar addicted, not food addicted, but sugar addicted because of it's Treatsville from the minute you're born. It's 3, 5, 6, go to school. Oh, it's 10 o'clock. Oh, little Johnny and Jill, they need to have a bicky now. It's just, it's ingrained now, our obesogenic environment.
It really, really is, isn't it? And like everywhere you go, it's so hard for people because we're so, it's a survival. We're so cued by what we see then is sort of what we want to eat, particularly if we've had it before. And you go to the garage, don't you? And there's a wall of chocolate and crisps. The first thing you see when you come to the supermarket is all these 3-for-1 bargains of, I don't know, big buckets of chocolate. Every sort of cultural event now seems to, because of the marketing around food, seems to be that Halloween's all about sweets, Valentine's is all about chocolate, Mother's Day is all about cakes, Christmas is all about food. Like everything's all, the emphasis is so much on food, and it's almost like we've been sold this idea that you can't have a good time if you're not stuffing your face with ultra processed food and drinking yourself under the table. So I think yes, everything's become very, very food centric and not necessarily in a good way. Yes, children are sort of rewarded with food. We learn it from a really early age, don't we?
I mean, if I were to appoint you both public health ministers for the world, not just for the UK, which has a terrible problem with ultra-processed foods, what 3 radical moves would each of you do in turn, almost immediately? I mean, never mind the lobbyists from Big Pharma, Big Food. If you had total control over all the levers and you just say, I decide that's happening and that's happening and that's no longer happening, what would each of you do?
Yeah, it's going to take a real massive turnaround, I think, isn't it? This is a big oil tanker going in the right direction. So there's going to have to be some really big levers. One of mine would be around starting with schools and, really getting back to teaching kids what's real food, what's ultra-processed food, and educating them about the effects of sugar on their little brains. I mean, we don't give them alcohol, nicotine, caffeine and drugs, do we, these little people whose brains are forming? But sugar is a psychoactive substance, and they're eating sugar all day long, as you say. So I think that would be a sort of ground up thing where you're sort of going back to basics with the schools and the school dinners. I really support that, about there being good quality food available for kids, particularly those from maybe lower socioeconomic backgrounds. People should have access to real food, vegetables, meat, fish, eggs, and a lot of people don't. So that'd be one thing for me. Another thing is to really support. I was going to do. Can I do all my 3?
You do your 3, and I'll just
yours might be similar to mine. Another one is, let's really get behind the farmers in the UK who are doing good quality practice, regenerative farming, rearing animals in a kind way, local food. Let's get away from this kind of big food sort of stuff. I think that would make a real difference. And then I was thinking about, I think the sugar tax has been a help. I think we can go further with that on things that aren't, sugar isn't really a food in my book. So, maybe we could tax that more. And also, I noticed that there isn't VAT on sort of processed ready meals. And I think, people need to go back to finding the time. We need to somehow facilitate people to cook from scratch. It doesn't have to take a long time. And we need to turn them away from these kind of ready meals, which are full of seed oils, sugars, things to make them taste nice. That I think we eat way too many ready meals in the UK. So let's turn that around.
I know, you see some people's carts just loaded up and you think, oh, where's your food? You're just throwing that in the microwave overnight. Okay, David, your 3 radical moves, what would they be?
Thank you. My first thing is to ban all food advertising. Because if you think about it, just think about the foods you've seen advertised when you've been at the pictures or wherever. Were any of them healthy? No, none of them were. And so I think food advertising, it's aimed at all sorts of vulnerable people, children, mothers, all the rest of it. And it gives the idea that you're happy if you have Coca-Cola, you're happy if you eat pizza and so on. And it's a really vicious link. So I love this power. It's going to my head. I can feel it. So we're going to ban advertising. I really love Jen's idea of a junk food tax. But I would add to that, the people who have the worst diet in society are the poorest people. And so we should use the junk food tax to subsidize whole foods, like green vegetables, like meat, eggs, fish, that kind of thing. So and this has been done in Brazil. They did it in a city in Brazil, so that you tax the junk foods and you use the money that you make to help people afford healthy food. And I think another point which Jen was making is education of young people, because I've got patients who I have to explain how to make an omelette. They don't know how to make even an omelette. So clearly, if we're going to take the junk foods away, we must also help people learn how to prepare simple meals. And my last idea, I've got one less idea. The power's gone to my head. My last idea. I'm sorry to say, I don't think we're incentivizing British doctors to think about lifestyle medicine. And so all of the emphasis is on prescribing medication. And I would like to pay GPs to take the time to offer their patients lifestyle alternatives to lifelong medication. And at the moment, in a 10-minute appointment, it's not doctors are tired, exhausted, they're just prescribing. And we could save money by using lifestyle alternatives. Because whenever I ask patients, would you like to start this medication today? Or are you interested in a lifestyle alternative? I haven't been turned down once. So I think we really must help doctors, give them the time to explain there are alternatives to many of the medications that we use. Not all of them, but there are alternatives to many of them.
And your e-learning module through the what is it, the Royal General Society of Physicians?
So I did an e-learning module for the Royal College of General Practitioners on helping their patients eat fewer carbohydrates so they don't need drugs for type 2 diabetes. And this was one of the most successful modules they've ever published. And I know that 2,300 GPs have downloaded that so far, or they had last time I checked. There's a lot of GPs still to go, but it shows there is interest. And
there's
I just
growing awareness, isn't there? And
yes.
There are a lot of initiatives. I had Jane Bullen and a couple of the graduate health practitioners of the Noakes Foundation's Nutrition Network on a couple of weeks ago. And you are one of the founding members of the public health collaboration here.
Yeah.
There are all kinds of things from the grassroots sweeping the globe in so many different countries. I mean, that must feel energizing for you to have been such a big part of this.
It certainly feels like the tide is turning. I mean, when we started, we were the only, as far as we knew, the only people doing it in the UK, and we soon got invited, to go and sort of talk all over the place in America and so on about it. But it's spreading. It is spreading like a virus because it's right and because it works. So I think I think the genie's out of the bottle, it is really exciting, and it's lovely now to be part of a movement rather than some sort of lone nuts who were getting sort of attacked by all and sundry for being mad. It's lovely now to be part of a bigger movement.
One of the take-home messages, I think, way beyond nutrition is find your tribe, and social media is so good for helping you find your tribe. And if you've got shared goals, this is one of Jen's big things. If you have shared goals with other people, it's amazing what you can achieve, quite apart from being slightly older as I am. shared goals are very energizing and very, very powerful. And I think that's what we've done. We're in contact with probably thousands of healthcare professionals and probably hundreds of thousands of individuals around the world who are interested in making a difference.
And outside of that global echo chamber, let's call it that, because Real Food Twitter, you've got a cast of characters. It's an expanding tribe, but you do have the pioneers like yourselves and some other people in the United States, and low carb down under and low carb up and over, and all these different people that are doing all kinds of wonderful things to spread the news. But outside, the dissonance comes for people when they leave your surgery, or when they don't open that window or door into that world. And outside, the competing messages is, never mind, that's quackery, keto, low carb, that's just another passing fad. And a lot of medical practitioners and dietitians and I guess nutritionists who are less schooled than dietitians, I mean, they're putting out these messages. Never mind those nuts that are low carbing it. Just have your smoothie, have your baked potato, cover it with beans and butter, and you'll be fine.
I suppose that's true. And if that works for individual members who are listening to this, good. But the big question is, well, is it working? How many people are being put on medication? So if something works, do it. But if it doesn't work, I'd say to people, be a little bit critical. So if that advice you gave doesn't work, perhaps think again. And also, does the advice make sense? So I would say it kind of makes a basic sense to advise people who can't deal with sugar to eat less sugar. That's not very contentious.
This is Smudge insisting on coming in.
Hello,
Sorry
Smudge.
about that. Smudge, goodness.
Okay.
Last interview was Arlo, but you can't keep them away. When they want in, they want in. They just shove the door. So listen, the thing is, though, low carb, that is working, and you've been putting out the papers, renal function, does too much protein? There's always been a concern about that.
Yeah.
All these great papers that are fully accessible for people, and they can look at them through the public health collaboration as well. But I'm thinking for the average Joe or Jill who says, well, carbs aren't a problem for me. And would your message be, well, not now, but wait 5 minutes or 5 years, and you might be in a world of trouble?
Okay, that's a really good point. So let's just broaden it a little. So we do know that 8 different forms of cancer are linked to central obesity, and Cancer Research UK promoted only 2 years ago on bus stops that obesity was the second commonest cause of cancer in the UK. So this isn't just about, okay, you're not worried about diabetes. Are you worried about high blood pressure? Most people have something that they're concerned about. So you've got to add in not just diabetes, fatty liver, high blood pressure, strokes, heart disease, and cancer. I think that's becoming really quite important. And so how many of us are in perfect health? If you're in perfect health, maybe you don't have to worry. But my experience in general practice is that about a third of all my patients have either a high blood pressure or a high triglyceride, or they have weight problems. So it does affect a lot of people.
Yeah. And we're not talking about, I think the important thing to stress is we're not talking about weight loss all the time. We're talking about health span and optimizing your health, not to get yourself out of these difficulties, cardiometabolic difficulties. And, I think keto and low carbing, it gets a lot of pushback because people say, oh, there you go, it's the toxic diet culture again. And I don't think people understand fat isn't inert. It's creating physiologic problems for you.
Yeah, and mental health problems as well. I mean, we all want to be energetic and kind of on the ball cognitively as well. And there's loads of evidence of the benefits of less sugar for your brain doesn't like sugar, if nothing else. So even if people just want to be their sparkliest selves, then maybe it's something to think about in terms of the amount of sugar and refined carbohydrates and ultra processed foods in their diet.
I think you made a very good point back there about this is about health span, not lifespan. And for me, the really important thing is what happens in the last 10 to 15 years of your life. I'd like to see people energetic and having fun. What I'm seeing is that aspects of metabolic ill health are stealing the last few useful years from people's lives. And when I know what's possible, so my oldest patient is 92 years old and she's in her own house. The other day I rang up, she couldn't answer the phone because she was busy gardening. That's what I aspire to helping. This idea of health span, to be as independent as you possibly can for as long as you can.
I mean, that's just it. It's quality of life. We're getting,
yes,
since the 1900s, an additional 10 to 15 years of life in the middle. That's why I call it the big middle. It's a bigger middle bit for the many of us who are lucky enough. I mean, we all know stories and loads of people. I mean, my mother, she only made it to 52, poor thing. And she was a health nut, I tell you, from that time period. But she got ovarian cancer. So, of course, that was, that was a death sentence. It still is, but back then in the 80s. And so why did I even bring that up? It's just that we all want to live happy lives. And I don't think enough people understand when they hear ketogenic or low carb that this delivers so much in terms of prioritizing protein and minimizing carbs back to under 20 to 100 grams. The clarity of focus, the happiness bump you get. And this is sort of your terrain, Jen. I know I saw a tweet from you the other day that talked about the acronym DOSE. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that's from the book. So I'll come on to that, but I was just, a good way to explain it that I often say to people is think about, in a way, how we evolved and when we were kind of running around in our little rabbit skins and living in a cave, where did we get carbohydrates from? We didn't, and that was over millions and millions of years. Our brains actually were designed to run on fat and fuel because that's mostly what we got. If we found any carbohydrates, there were little piddly berries in the autumn, a few nuts. If we were really brave, we could probably find some honey, but that probably only happened a couple of times a year. So our physiology wasn't designed to run on these high levels of carbohydrates. So you could say, as Ken Berry says, that actually what keto low carb people are advocating is the proper human diet. It's the way the brain loves fat, it loves ketones. It's mostly made of fat. So just to sort of say that, and I suppose that ties in really with this acronym DOSE, which is in terms of the brain neurotransmitters, the ones that we really like and we want plenty of are dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. So dopamine is the reward and motivation neurotransmitter. We all want that. We all want to feel motivated. We want to get a kind of, success feeling, don't we? Oxytocin is the closeness hormone. It's the kind of, you're feeling attached to people, you feel connected to people. Serotonin is the lovely, relaxy, contented feeling. And endorphins is obviously the natural painkillers and this sort of euphoric sort of feeling that you can get with endorphins. And a lot of us have been increasingly relying on foods to get our bump of these things, particularly dopamine. So sugar gives you a big dopamine hit, like other drugs of addiction, and that's why they become addictive, because you get this big bump of dopamine. Unfortunately, what happens is that what goes up must come down, as we know, and your brain doesn't really like these really big bumps of anything, so it knocks out a few of your receptors for dopamine. So it becomes a downward spiral. The more sugar we have, the more we want, but the less we get that good effect that we're looking for. And it's a vicious downward spiral. So where one slice of cake was enough to cheer you up, it becomes 2, 3, and for some of us a whole cake. And then we're sort of ignoring other things as well in life that might give us that feel good. So there's similar processes with all those other brain neurotransmitters, but that's want to explain to people.
If I can just add, so it's very much like alcohol, really.
It's the same.
So we're
place
all
in the
familiar
brain.
with, the sort of person who requires half a bottle to get their fix. Well, there are a lot of people that require a lot of carbohydrates now. And the two things, alcohol problems and food addiction problems, are very...
It's the same mechanism
really
in the brain, the same center.
similar.
If you look at the brain scans,
Yes.
you couldn't tell them apart. You couldn't tell if somebody was having an alcohol problem, a heroin problem, or a sugar problem. It does the same kind of thing.
And it's
in the
tobacco and hard drugs, though, we're not giving sugar the same credence. The public health messaging has simply not caught up. It's all the vested interest, piling
Yes.
in. And we've got Boris, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, going low carb. Matt Hancock shed some weight low carb.
Yes.
Tom Watson, an MP who's here in the UK, very influential. These messages, though, aren't moving across
They're
to
not
the
coming down to
policy
public
level.
health. I mean, I think all of that is a matter of time. I really, really hope that. I think the pressure will come for that to be the case. I think you're right. I think the vested interest obviously makes it a problem. If we go back, how many decades it is now? They were saying tobacco wasn't addictive when they stood up in Congress and said it, didn't they? The guys, the owners of the big cigarette companies. Probably the sugar guys would stand up and say that sugar isn't addictive. In fact, that is what people say, but there's mounting evidence that sugar has these same kinds of neurophysiological effects in the brain. So I think its time will come. I think we just need to keep pushing and hoping, and I really hope in my lifetime that it's accepted that sugar is a psychoactive substance and needs to be controlled, particularly for children. So. We don't give kids all these other things, and it rewires their brains. We wouldn't give kids other things that affected their brains. So
we've messed up our physiology and our psychology to such a bad degree, and the socio element too, because as weaning the kids on everything's a treat, and every treat involves a sugar load, and weaning them onto this carb roller coaster for the rest of their lives. And this is why I love your sugar infographics, David. I don't know if you want to say something else before we get into those, because
I'll do the sugar infographic. I just wanted to say that the number of teenagers I see, maybe they're 15 or 16, they have a weight problem, and they are already addicted to things like energy drinks. Instead of breakfast, they're having energy drinks, and they're suffering because they're obese, which is terrible for their self-esteem. And you'd be surprised how hard it is for them to start eating real food. And that's because even by the age of 16, I think addiction is taking hold. And it is so hard to help them. I'll get onto the sugar equivalent charts are, so you've all heard of the low GI diet, which is that the doctor that's on television all the time? Michael Mosley's, low GI diet, terribly popular. That stands for glycemic index. And the glycemic index ranks food into how sugary they are compared to pure glucose. But I had a problem. I was trying to explain this to my patients, but they didn't understand glucose as a substance because they don't cook with it. And also older people don't understand grams because they don't cook with grams of anything. So they don't know what 16 grams of glucose is. So we redid the glycemic index, or more properly, the glycemic load, in terms that my patients could understand. Teaspoons, 4-gram teaspoons of sugar, so that I'm now able to tell you that in terms of your blood sugar, having 150 grams of boiled rice, a bowl of boiled rice, is the same as 10 teaspoons of sugar. Or a bowl of cornflakes, a really small bowl of cornflakes without any sugar on and without any milk on, is 8 or 9 teaspoons of sugar. And those are my sugar infographics. There are actually 7 of them, and they've been translated, I think, into 14 languages now. Millions of people have viewed those around the world. Anybody that wants to look there, we don't do anything for profit. So those are to be found. If you just Google PHC, sugar and Unwin, you'll find the charity we helped set up and the sugar infographics, and much beside is there for free for anyone who's interested.
I did have a wonderful episode with Sam Feltham, the founder of the Public Health Collaboration UK. And you're a founding member along with some other esteemed, eminent physicians and health practitioners. The thing is, with those sugar things, the sugar, I mean, it's wonderful to be able to visualize like that. But then you've got people, well, let's talk first about the Daily Mail on Sunday, or the Sunday on Mail, or whatever it's called. There was a bit of a hit piece against them. They were sanctioned by the government, and then, I mean, tell us what happened in a nutshell, and then tell me, was that a massive setback for you or just a blip? Everyone else is still going along and using them because they're so powerful.
So the first thing is we've got to differentiate between the Daily Mail, who support me completely and for whom I've written 40 or 50 pieces now, and the Mail on Sunday. And it was the Mail on Sunday who spent, to my certain knowledge, 5 to 6 months trying to rubbish my works. So they were searching. They started in the January and didn't publish till about the June. And we actually, the Public Health Collaboration, put in a freedom of information request to find out what had gone on in the Mail on Sunday. And what they had done was they didn't like the fact that my work had been approved by NICE, which is a government body. So the work was approved by NICE. They checked the calculations. They found they were correct. And they even awarded me a prize. I was shortlisted rather because they felt the work was so useful.
What did they like about it? I mean, who was carping about them on the fringe?
They did on the fringe. Who was it? I don't like to name names, but we know who they are. But I wouldn't like to fight back.
No, we don't want to be. Well, keep it classy. But
let's say it's pretty obvious that everything I do is not making money for anybody. In fact,
exactly. So it was the big organizations.
Perhaps.
Okay.
But anyway. So they contacted NICE and they said, we will name the professor in charge of NICE in the Mail on Sunday as, they said, we will publish the following piece and name the professor.
Criticising the head of NICE.
And criticising NICE if you don't withdraw your support for Dr. Unwin. And I was so disappointed that NICE, they never consulted. I was never given the chance to fight back or answer the criticisms.
So they haven't said that they've never said the calculations were wrong or there was anything wrong with the work. They said that their rationale was it makes it look like NICE supports low carbohydrate diets, and that isn't their official position. So that was why they withdrew.
So they withdrew it. And then
they just withdrew without saying anything, slunk away. And away they went. And now you're busy spreading them all over the world, and the uptake is still good.
Doesn't matter. Yes.
Exactly. So at the time, I was very upset. I was really upset because you take it personally when you read something in the papers about yourself. But actually, I actually got another 1,000 followers on Twitter. I realized that, is there such a thing as bad publicity? I don't know. It hasn't really made very much difference. And it's taught me, to chin up, get on with it, and don't be too upset.
Well, the trolls are going to go after you, and they have gone after you. And I understand in 2012, when you started, you got no end of criticism. Yeah. But, I mean, that's the thing. I guess you have to be a little bit like your kitchen occupant, the skink, or what do you call it? You have to develop that you have to develop that reptilian shell and
if it's right, it's right. And if you're helping people, you're helping people. I don't know what we were always so puzzled at conferences when people were critical, because we thought, well, what is it they don't like about people getting better?
Yes.
Am I to put everybody back on the drugs that they're on?
We have the data,
And that's the power of data. And I also think that's why it's so important to both of us to continue to work with the patients, because it's kind of oxygen for us. So you do end up
Go ahead.
doubting yourself, but if you pay and they look terrific and they're so grateful and they're coming off medication and they're shining
It's
really with
oxygen
health.
to us, isn't
It
it?
keeps us going.
Yeah.
And that's why I haven't managed to give up my clinical work, because I love it so.
The other thing is too, you two, I call you the dynamic duo because you're kind of dynamic duo out there on the international circuit, spreading the news, but also, you know, you mentioned hope a lot, Jen, and the community aspect, the dynamism of the community and finding the tribe. But you also aren't saying that, yes, food is such a big piece of the pie, but there are other tools that you have to utilize. You know, you guys go running together. You obviously get along incredibly well. You've been married for 25 years, but working, you know, you have to bring everything lifestyle to the table, don't you? You can't just be obsessing about what you're putting in your mouth.
True. Yes, particularly for food addicts, I would say, because the food, you have to get that food plan right, but then really you've got to get your dose of all those neurotransmitters. You have to put something in its place, because if you're going to give up the food and be miserable, well, that's no good, is it? You've got to find other ways of living your best life and getting those neurotransmitters. Yeah, so we run. I do a boot camp. I love knitting. David loves wildlife. He's got some land that he looks after for British nature, and so we're really busy.
Just to put it together, I think Jen taught me something really good, and that is you have your diet of food, but you also have your diet of influences, the influences on your life, and that needs to be in balance as well. And that's about our amazing, wonderful grandchildren, my kids, enjoying wildlife, enjoying looking out of the window and seeing the sunshine. Your diet of influences needs to be balanced. And particularly if you're going to give up something you're a bit addicted to, whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever, you need those counterbalances to keep you sane. So I love the idea of a diet of influences, but that's Jen's idea, not mine.
Oh, that's beautiful. But that's what, you know, it's the human. We're holistic. We're not just body parts, you know, and we're biophysio. Everything comes together. Our community, our relationships, and in midlife that becomes even more important, because you know we're in a transition period now that we do have longer health spans if we're lucky, and 10 to 15 extra years in good health. And hopefully, I mean, the end game is always compressed morbidity. That's what we want. You know, we all want to live healthy up until the day before we drop down, and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
In wonderful, rude, good health. And you are showing the way that this can be done. Could this have been possible, David? I'm thinking if you were 10 years younger. You know, you started this 10 years ago, but let's say that before 2012, 10 years prior to that, is it something about this midpoint in your life that coalesced and got you both thinking, well, now's the time we can do this? What are we don't need a new sofa, we don't need another car.
That's right. It's a really great point, and I like, you know, being older offers such great opportunities. And for me, one of the most important ones was the idea that I would do something quite separately from being paid. It was so liberating. I was going to do something that was nothing to do with being paid, and that you can only do that when you've raised your children and paid off your mortgage. That's the first factor. I also think by the age of 55, I was probably better at handling people, because I'd learned a lot about dealing with so many thousands of patients. And I'm not sure that I could have done it when I was younger. Also, we were at the right stage in our lives, really.
So our youngest was born in 2000. He's going to be 21 in a couple of weeks, actually. We've just been thinking about it. So he was 12, and they become quite a bit more independent then, don't they? So you do have quite a bit more headspace, and we'd both sort of really honed our professional skills. I think we were just really lucky that they kind of dovetailed so perfectly for a project like this.
Well, in a way, it makes the most perfect retirement. I remember Jen used to say, what would be a good retirement? What do you want to do? And I realized I wanted I wanted to make a difference and use the skills that I'd got rather than just bin them and do something else. So when I look, I used to think if only I'd been doing this from when I was 30, but really, I suppose you would say it's quite, I had 3 children, I had a mortgage, I had loads of stuff going on. And how realistic is that? And also, did we have the skills? Jen, it came perfectly. Jen had spent a lifetime honing her skills as a psychologist, and you'd got that pretty sharp by the time we thought of working together. So I don't think it's really realistic to do it.
It was definitely a project of its time, and it is lovely that it's something we can just continue as long as we want to do it now, really, as long as it's we're being helpful and we're enjoying it. Really,
it's the just desserts of a lifetime of effort and being able to amass what you need materially and take care of your family. And now you've got that runway and freedom to go, okay, we don't need to add to our bank account. We can use the knowledge that we've gained. And we know from many, many studies, all the big universities, all the big foundations out there have studied the midlife transition. There is a shift that happens in the mind. You have more emotional regulation. You have pattern recognition. And, I've heard you say, David, you used to use scare tactics on your patients and you'd engage in shroud waving.
I did, yeah.
And now
that's
your
terrible,
blend
isn't
of,
it?
well, the thing is, if you were 35 and 40, you wouldn't have seen the sense of a gentler, softer, hope-filled, Jen-style approach, would you?
I was in a hurry. I when I was younger, I couldn't take the longer way round. And then when you're older, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And sometimes longer way round does a better job. And that's what I know now. That it's not all about finishing in 10 minutes. It's that longer goal, and much better taking a more distant goal and being strategic than I would have been as a young doctor, I think.
And what do you think, Jen, for your own personal timing? 48, and you said you used to have 3 magnums right out of the box, bing, bang, bing, and other things but a lot of people, I know a lot of men would say that they don't do that, but I just had a lodger here, 34 years old, committed vegetarian. He actually complained once because I roasted a chicken, and honest to goodness, the morning recycling bag told a tale of, I thought of you actually, I thought, oh my God, Jen needs to talk to this chap, told a tale of extreme sugar addiction. Packets of biscuits and all kinds of rubbish and crisps and like big family-sized bags. And, I would see it in the morning because I would take out the recycling because, oh my goodness, the bag is full again. It's got to go out to the bin.
There's a significant proportion of people, I think, that have that same struggle, and it's always done in secret, isn't it? That we don't always know because people are sort of doing it in secret. It's fantastic for me because it's been part of my journey as well to find a solution, to find a way of being with myself that is so much healthier and happier, and being around food in a much healthier way than I have been my whole life. So that's another reason. It's another reason it's a passion to keep going, to sort of rescue other people from that. But it also keeps me on the straight and narrow as well, because like we were saying, towards the beginning, the environment we live in is always tempting us back to that. It's always trying to get us back to it. So we're very low carbohydrate. When it's just us, we just have 1 meal a day. We focus a lot on protein and green vegetables and things like that. So it really keeps me on the straight and narrow as well. So it's all come together very nicely.
I would say, Jen, you're still learning.
We changed,
so
we developed.
You've learned stuff in the last year, so it's difficult to give up. We are still learning, and the results of the practice are still improving.
Well, it's the lifelong learning. That's the centerpiece of being engaged and having renewed purpose. And these are all of the touchstones of, post 50s, 60s, and it's it's classic, but you have to find your mission, and you guys have found your mission. I want to ask you a final question in turn. On a personal level, have you found anything out about Jen, David, that you didn't know that that you're delighting in, or maybe you think, oh, it's a bit annoying sometimes? And same question to you, Jen, because you're working, side by each, hand in glove all the time.
Yeah, every day, yeah.
I think for me, the come to understand Jen so much better, because I had no idea for the first sort of 15 years of a married life, food and thinking about food was a major problem for Jen. Aspects of her that I didn't understand, and I couldn't help. And really, I was missing a piece of the jigsaw, that Jen had a food addiction that she didn't even really understand herself. So it's made our life so much more comfortable, really, because now I do understand, and Jen's sorted it in any case. So it's been a wonderful reward to have a woman happy. So I'm just really grateful for that.
And what about you, Jen? Any surprises you've learned about your formerly sleepy, on the verge of diabetes husband?
Yes, incredibly surprised, because let me tell you that
so incredibly, rather annoyingly, that's when the internet went out. It crashed. So we don't have superpowers. You don't get in midlife to just be able to do quick changes like Batman. But this is the morning after our initial chat. And I'm going to then, Jen, it's like a cliffhanger that didn't get finished, the end page of a book that's missing. So can you continue with that answer? Incredibly, surprisingly, what have you discovered about your husband from the past decade of working more closely than before?
Yeah. So many things. So what some people won't know, some people will, because he has mentioned it occasionally. David's quite dyslexic. So when he was doing his kind of sleepy GP thing, if he ever did have to write anything, he was really miserable about it. And he'd shout to me from his office, "How do you spell unnecessary?" And I'd have to spell it out. And everything that he did write was pretty rare. I would have to spell check it, and there'd be all these grammatical, it was painful for me, grammatical errors and full stops in the wrong place, capital letters in the wrong place. It was just painful. But over these 9 years, it's incredible now that so the first paper I was really involved with the grammar and the editing, but now he writes long documents, he reads long documents, it's really been an incredible transformation. It just, as you were saying before, it shows what having that purpose and that motivation does. He's actually learned to, he still types with 2 fingers like that, but a lot faster. So that's been incredible. And the fact that he's written these academic papers, not only that, he was such a grump about social media and mobile phones, didn't want to be contactable, any of that stuff. We just couldn't get him to even have a mobile phone. Well, as you were saying, now he's all over Twitter with, I don't know how many followers now. 64,000 followers on Twitter.
It's incredible.
He used to tell the teenagers that we had in the house that social media was an evil. So he's learned that, sometimes, you're careful what you say, because sometimes it comes back. And they still tease him about it now, because he's often on social media, and they say, "Oh, you better get off social media. It's not good for you." So it's been incredible what he's learned to do in the last 9 or 10 years. Incredible.
It is incredible. And, the wave that you're contributing to, it's global now. And the democratization of the internet and your newfound facility, Dr. David, with the internet and with Word documents. Because I know I was listening to one interview you did, and you said one of your papers, I think it was your magnum opus, the first one, and you said 305 or 308 Word documents went into that in a year. It was like giving birth to a baby. I mean, so you've really had to master getting the work done without your wife copy editor.
I think it's all about goals, isn't it? So if you really want to do something, you will find a way. And I'm a pragmatist, and I'm trying so hard to make a difference. So I may be older, but I can, I'm an old dog that can learn new tricks, and there's some evidence for that.
Absolutely. Well, I know you just had your 63rd birthday. Happy birthday. Spotted that on Twitter. And that's not old. I mean, that's the thing. I'm trying with the big middle to rehabilitate the word old. You know, it's always synonymous with washed out and you're about to keel over and never mind. And we're not. You know, I'm going to go for a huge marathon walk. I'll be doing a body pump class later. I don't feel old, and we all know that nobody ever feels old, but we just have to get over this idea where
Yes.
we can't learn new things. And, you know, when I think about all of the learning that you are bringing to the table now and to the global movement, real food, low carb, and the benefits of knowing this is an option for people. I mean, it's fantastic.
Can I make a very absolutely final point from the research that we did concerning older people? This is my most hopeful and cheerful thing to end on. When we actually looked at the data and we looked at how did older people do against the younger ones, and this really amazed me. Older people lost slightly more weight. The people over 65 lost slightly more weight than the young ones. Isn't that surprising? I'd always thought old people struggled to lose weight and maybe not bother.
And this
How
is the
comforting.
diabetic cohort that you have had,
Yes.
or is this?
So, well, actually, no. When we looked, so I've got hundreds of patients and they're doing this for different reasons, blood pressure, obesity, whatever. But when we looked at it, the people over 65 did better than the young ones. And that's my final word of hope.
So are you going to dig into that? Are you going to dig into that more? Is it prioritizing protein, do you think? When you reduce the carbs and the satiety, you end up not eating for hours because you're just not hungry.
Well, it is that they're having more protein when older people often don't have enough protein. But it's also older people know how to cook. They have the time to look after themselves. And sometimes they're a little bit better off. They're less rushed than people bringing up children and so on. So I think it's all of those things. I think the basic diet was poor for some of them, not nearly enough protein, but also they're nearer to remembering, yes, that's how we do meat and 2 veg. I know how to roast a chicken. I know how to do these things. So older people have some very useful skills when it comes to nutrition.
Absolutely. And we just need to make these intergenerational connections where the young are getting to learn from these mentors, which are older. I mean, it takes 5 minutes to knock up a bit of protein and some veg.
Yes.
Yeah.
Huge thanks to the Drs Unwin, Jen and David. Thank you so much. It's been such an honor to speak with you. And you've given us so many insights. Loved hearing about, you know, the midlife shift and how that put you in a position where you could devote more time and attention to your mission. Thank you so much for coming on The Big Middle.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And thank you at home or on the move for listening and or watching. And you can head to my website, susanflory.com, to support this podcast. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time. Ciao for now.